They called me a ghost, a whisper in the dark, a necessary evil in a world drowning in chaos. From the shadows, I served a cause I believed in, the cause of freedom. I was a scalpel, precise and clean, cutting away the cancers that threatened the world. My name is Elias Crow, or at least, that was the name they gave me. Tonight, in Dubai, I was performing my final surgery. The target was a financier, a man whose money fueled terror networks across the globe, or so they told me. My mission was simple: erase him, make it look like a ghost had passed through. No witnesses, no trail, just a quiet end to a violent man's story. The air in the penthouse suite was still. It smelled of expensive cologne, imported cigars. Below me, the city pulsed with a million lights, a glittering jewel in the desert night. I moved through the opulent space like a phantom. My gear was black, my weapon was suppressed, my heart was a block of ice. I had trained for years to be this empty, to feel nothing. Emotion is a liability in this line of work. It gets you killed. It got her killed. I pushed the thought of my wife away. It was a ghost of a different kind, one that haunted me in the quiet moments between kills. This kill, they said, would be the last clean one. My target stood with his back to me. He was admiring the view from his floor-to-ceiling windows. A glass of amber liquid was in his hand. He never heard me approach. There was no struggle, no grand final speech, just a soft sigh as the life left him. It was a clean kill, just as they had ordered. The silencer on my pistol coughed once, a sound swallowed by the thick carpets and heavy drapes. I laid him down gently, a strange act of reverence for a man I was sent to destroy. I was a professional, an instrument of a higher purpose. I was protecting the innocent. I was preserving the light. That was the lie I told myself, a lie I was starting to believe. As I confirmed the target was neutralized, my eyes swept the room. Protocol demanded a quick, clean exit. But something caught my attention. A small, encrypted hard drive sat on the mahogany desk, humming softly next to a state-of-the-art laptop. It wasn't part of my briefing. It was an unknown variable, a piece that didn't fit. My handler's voice was a sterile whisper in my ear. Spectre, exfil now. The clock is ticking. But a deeper instinct, a flicker of curiosity I thought was long dead, made me hesitate. I was supposed to be a ghost, but even ghosts can leave footprints. And sometimes, they take things that don't belong to them. Dubai glittered below me, a monument to ambition and excess. A city built on sand and dreams. From this height, it looked perfect, a flawless diamond. But I knew the truth. Every city has its cracks, its dark alleys, hidden sins. My mission was to navigate those cracks, to be one of the shadows that lived within them. The target was down. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part, disappearing back into the night. The plan was simple, a well-rehearsed dance of timing and precision. A service elevator, a stolen maintenance uniform, a quiet exit through a deserted parking garage. It was a routine I had performed 100 times, but tonight, routine was a luxury I couldn't afford. As I moved to leave, a faint alarm chirped from the target security console, a silent tripwire I hadn't seen. A secondary system, off the books. My handler's voice crackled with sudden urgency in my comms. Spectre, compromised, abort standard exfil. Repeat, abort, go loud if you have to. The quiet surgery was over. Now it was a messy extraction. The penthouse was on the 88th floor. That was a long way down when every guard in the building was suddenly looking for you. The city of gold had just turned into a cage. I abandoned the silent approach. My movements became sharp. My movements became economical. My movements became brutal. 2 guards burst through the main door, weapons raised. They were professionals, private security, but they were not prepared for a ghost. I moved through them like water, a blur of motion, a disarm, a broken joint, a precise strike to the throat. They went down without a sound. I couldn't afford gunfire. Not yet. I had to get to the lower levels, to blend into the chaos of the city streets. My mind raced, calculating routes, assessing threats, processing 1,000 variables a second. This was what I was built for. This was my element. My only way out was the window. The cold glass pressed against my gear as I peered down at the dizzying drop. The wind howled around the skyscraper, a lonely, mournful sound. Below, the streets were a river of light and motion. A crowded souk, teeming with life, was my destination. It was the perfect place to vanish, a sea of faces where one more would go unnoticed. I took one last look at the dead man on the floor, the silent architect of his own demise. My job was done, but as I prepared to rappel down the side of the building, my eyes fell again on that small hard drive on the desk. A voice in my head, a whisper of defiance, told me to take it. The descent was a controlled fall, a blur of steel and glass against the night sky. The wind tore at me, trying to rip me from the side of the tower. My grapnel line held firm. I was a spider on a thread of my own making. Below, the gold souk was a chaotic symphony of light and sound. Neon signs bled into puddles on the slick pavement. The smell of spices, perfumes, street food rose to meet me. This was my camouflage. I landed in a dark alley between two buildings, shedding my rappel gear in seconds. The black tactical suit came off. Simple clothes of a tourist went on. I was a ghost no more. I was just a face in the crowd. I shoved the hard drive into my pocket. It felt heavy, dense with secrets I couldn't begin to imagine. It was a stupid move, a deviation from the plan, an emotional impulse. I hadn't had one of those in years. As I melted into the throng of people, I felt a strange sense of ownership over the small device. It was a trophy from a kill that was supposed to be clean, a piece of the puzzle I wasn't meant to have. During the chaos of the alarm and the escape, I had acted on pure instinct. I had grabbed the drive from the desk, a last-second decision that felt both reckless and necessary. It was a small act of rebellion against the sterile perfection of my world. The souk was a labyrinth. I moved through it with purpose, my senses on high alert. The chatter of a dozen languages, the glint of gold in a vendor's stall, the watchful eyes of a security camera. Every detail was a potential threat or a possible advantage. I could feel the city's pulse, its rhythm, and I could feel the hunt beginning. Aether would have assets on the ground within minutes. They would be looking for a ghost in tactical gear, not a tired-looking man in a cheap jacket. But they were thorough. They would not give up easily. I had to get to the extraction point, a nondescript van in a back street, my ticket out of this glittering cage. As I navigated the crowded marketplace, my mind kept returning to the drive. Why did I take it? It was a risk that outweighed any potential reward. My mission was to eliminate a target, not to engage in espionage. My job was to follow orders, not to ask questions. But something about this mission felt different. The target's calm demeanor, the secondary alarm, the feeling that I was only seeing a fraction of the real picture. The drive in my pocket was a tangible piece of that hidden reality. It was a clue, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the dangerous, intoxicating need to find out what it meant. The rain started as a light drizzle. It quickly turned into a downpour. The neon lights of the souk fractured and bled across the wet asphalt. Steam rose from the hot pavement. The world became a watercolor painting of reds, blues, golds. The rain was a blessing. It washed the streets clean. It made faces harder to recognize. It muffled the sounds of pursuit. I pulled my hood up, just another anonymous soul hurrying through the storm. The extraction point was close now. Just a few more turns through the maze of alleyways. The tension in my shoulders began to ease, just slightly. Escape was within reach. I rounded a final corner and saw it. A dark panel van parked under a flickering street lamp. Its engine was running. The driver's side window was down, just enough for a final confirmation code. This was it. The end of the line for Dubai. The end of my last mission. As I approached, I kept my head down, my hands in my pockets. One hand was wrapped around the cool metal of the hard drive, an object that had no place in this picture. It was a foreign element, a contaminant in a clean operation. I should have left it. I should have destroyed it, but I couldn't. It felt like the only real thing I was holding on to. The face of my wife, Anna, flashed in my mind. A memory triggered by the rain, maybe. We used to walk in the rain, She loved the way it made the world look new. She was the light in my life. The reason I thought I was fighting for something good. They told me she was killed in a car bombing meant for me. Collateral damage, they called it. A tragic but necessary price for the work I do. Her death hollowed me out. It made me the perfect weapon. Cold, empty, efficient. I hadn't allowed myself to truly think of her in years, but tonight, her memory was a persistent echo, a ghost that the rain couldn't wash away. I reached the van and muttered the code phrase. The door slid open. I climbed inside, the door shutting behind me with a heavy, final thud. The world outside was instantly cut off. Rain, the neon, the noise. I was safe. I was out. My handler's voice would come through soon, congratulating me on a successful, if messy, operation. But as I sat in the darkness of the van, the city streaking past the tinted windows, I felt no relief. I only felt the weight of the drive in my pocket. A small, dark secret. I had killed for freedom tonight. But as the rain lashed against the glass, a chilling thought began to form in the back of my mind. What if I had been killing for something else entirely? The journey from Dubai to Tallinn was a blur of calculated risks and cold, hard steel. I moved through the world's hidden arteries, the unseen network of cargo holds, clandestine transport. I was cargo myself, a human package in the dark belly of a freighter. I emerged into the crisp, cold air of the Baltic, a shock after the oppressive desert humidity. Tallinn greeted me, not with neon, not with noise, but with old stone and a gray, unforgiving sky. It was the perfect place for a ghost to lay low. My destination, a place no one knew, a secret kept even from Aether. The safe house, a converted shipping container, one of dozens stacked in a windswept port. From the outside, corrugated steel, rusted by salt, scarred with graffiti, the ultimate expression of anonymity. I had set it up years ago, a personal insurance policy, a day when the system I served turned against me. I had paid for it with untraceable crypto, stocked it with my own hands, and then erased its existence from my own official records. It was my concrete cocoon. Inside, brutally functional. A single cramped room, insulated and soundproofed, powered by an off-grid solar generator. A narrow cot folded against the wall. A small chemical toilet in the corner. The heart, the workstation. Custom-built rig, hardened against surveillance, daisy-chained to hijacked satellite uplinks. A digital fortress inside a physical one. This was where I'd dissect the serpent's heart stolen from Dubai. This was where truth, or damnation, awaited. I sealed the heavy steel door, the sound of the locking mechanism. A series of deep, satisfying clicks that shut out the outside world. The silence was absolute. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was truly alone, disconnected from the hunt. I stood in the dim light of the single LED strip that illuminated the room, the encrypted hard drive clutched in my hand. It felt cold, heavy, a dark star that had pulled me out of my orbit. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the silent tomb. I was a priest about to read from a forbidden text, knowing that the knowledge within could save my soul or destroy it completely. Section 2. I slid the hard drive into the custom-built reader. The connection was physical, a direct interface that bypassed any network vulnerabilities. The machine whirred to life, its fans a soft whisper in the otherwise silent container. On the main monitor, the drive appeared as a single locked icon, a black monolith in a sea of empty digital space. It was protected by a formidable layer of encryption, a military-grade algorithm designed to self-destruct if tampered with. It was a digital fortress, and I had to find a way to pick the lock without triggering the alarms. My own expertise was in physical infiltration, not cyber warfare, but over the years I had acquired a certain fluency in the language of machines. My fingers flew across the keyboard, the clatter of the keys the only sound in the room. I wasn't a master hacker, not like the wizards Aether employed in its cyberops division, but I was a patient and methodical ghost. I began to run a series of diagnostic probes, gentle exploratory programs designed to map the architecture of the encryption without alerting its defense systems. It was like feeling the tumblers of a complex lock in the dark, searching for the faintest click, the slightest give. The screen filled with scrolling lines of code, a waterfall of green and white characters that represented the drive's digital DNA. It was a language I only partially understood, but I could read its intent. It was designed to keep people like me out. Hours bled into one another. The world outside the container ceased to exist. There was only the hum of the computer, the glow of the screen, and the intense burning focus of my own mind. I ran brute force attack simulations on a partitioned virtual version of the drive, sacrificing millions of digital ghosts in an attempt to find a single weakness. Each attempt was a failure, the virtual drive wiping itself clean in a cascade of corrupted data. The encryption was a living thing, an intelligent defense system that learned from every attack and adapted its strategy. It was more than just a lock. It was a guardian, a silent sentinel protecting its secrets. Frustration began to mount, a cold tide rising in the back of my mind. I was a physical creature, a man of action, and I was trapped in a battle of pure intellect against a machine that could think a million times faster than me. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes, the green code seared onto my retinas. Then, an idea sparked. I wasn't just fighting the machine, I was fighting the person who built it. All security systems have a flaw, a human element, a password, a key phrase, something born of habit or ego. I shifted my approach. I stopped trying to break down the door and started looking for the key that had been left under the mat. I began searching for fragments, for patterns, for the ghost of its creator. Section 3. My search for a human fingerprint within the code led me down a rabbit hole of metadata and file fragments. Most of it was digital chaff, meaningless noise designed to mislead and distract. But buried deep within the drive's boot sector, I found it. A single line of commented-out code, a programmer's note left behind and forgotten. It wasn't a password, a phrase in classical Greek, Malin Labe, come and take them. The defiant cry of the Spartans at Thermopylae. A taunt, a challenge, but also a clue. It suggested a certain mindset, not a faceless corporate programmer, a true believer, or a profound cynic. The phrase became my new key, not the password, but a seed. I built new decryption algorithms based on philosophical and historical concepts of the Spartan ideal. I fed the machine, dictionaries of ancient Greek, lists of historical battles, the writings of Herodotus and Plutarch. A long shot, a desperate gamble. I tried to guess the shape of the creator's mind, to find the philosophical password. My fingers typed with renewed urgency. I was close. I could feel it. Then, abruptly, the breakthrough. Screen. Access denied. Screen. Authentication accepted. The black monolith icon shimmered, split open, revealing a neatly organized file structure. The dam had cracked. A wave of relief washed over me. I had done it. I was in. I stared at the screen, at the list of folders with deceptively simple names. Project Nightingale, Operation Black Swan, Elysium Initiative. Each a closed door. I held the master key. Malin Labe echoed. They dared me to come and take their secrets. My hand trembled as I moved the cursor to Project Nightingale. My heart pounded. This was the moment of truth. Everything I had done, the risks I had taken, the life I had left behind, all of it led to this single click. A part of me wanted to stop, to walk away into the Estonian night, to live in ignorance. But it was too late. The seed of doubt demanded to be fed. I took a deep breath. I clicked the mouse. The folder opened. Section 4. The contents of the Project Nightingale folder spilled onto my screen, and the world as I knew it began to dissolve. It wasn't a collection of memos or field reports. It was a meticulously detailed timeline, a calendar of calamity stretching back over a decade. The first file I opened was a simulation model, epidemiological charts, infection vectors, and economic impact projections. The title of the simulation was Nightingale 7, and the projected start date was Q4, 2019. It described a novel coronavirus, engineered for high transmissibility and low to moderate mortality, designed to create a global state of panic and pave the way for widespread societal lockdowns and the erosion of civil liberties. My blood ran cold. I scrolled through the data, my mind struggling to process the implications. This wasn't a prediction, it was a plan, a blueprint for a global pandemic. The files contained everything. Research on gain-of-function experiments conducted through shell corporations and third-party labs, media strategies for controlling the public narrative, and lists of key officials in global health organizations who were either assets or useful idiots. It was a script for a world-changing event, written years before it happened. The news clips that had dominated the world for 2 years were not journalism. They were the execution of a pre-written narrative. The fear, the division, the loss. It was all manufactured. I clicked on the next folder. Operation Black Swan. The theme was the same, but the subject was different. This folder contained intricate financial models and market simulations. It detailed a plan to trigger a global financial crisis, a controlled demolition of the world economy. It outlined how to create speculative bubbles in housing, complex financial derivatives, and then how to prick them at the precise moment to cause maximum chaos. The 2008 crash wasn't an accident of greed and poor regulation. It was a field test, a dry run. The documents detailed how Aether-controlled assets within major banks and rating agencies had worked in concert to ensure the collapse was as devastating as possible, wiping out middle-class wealth and consolidating power in the hands of a select few. I felt a wave of nausea. Every major crisis that had defined my adult life, every event that I believed was a natural, if tragic, part of the chaotic modern world, was laid out before me as a deliberate act of war. It was a war against the public, waged in secret by the very people who claimed to be their protectors. Proxy wars in the Middle East, engineered refugee crises to destabilize Europe, orchestrated social unrest. It was all there, cataloged and cross-referenced in a horrifying library of manufactured disasters. I was a soldier in that war, but I had been fighting on the wrong side, killing the people who, like me, were just stumbling in the dark, while the real monsters pulled the strings from the shadows. As I lay on the cot, the glow of the monitor casting long shadows across the container, my mind refused to rest. It kept replaying the data, the charts, the distorted voices from the audio logs. I felt as though I had been granted a glimpse into the abyss, a look into the cold, mechanical heart of the universe, only to find it was run by a committee of psychopaths. The sheer, calculated evil of it all was what staggered me the most. It wasn't born of passion or ideology, but of a cold, sterile desire for absolute control. They were not driven by a vision of a better world, but by a contempt for the messy, unpredictable nature of human freedom. I felt an overwhelming urge to find a personal connection, a human anchor in this storm of abstract horror. My fingers, acting on their own volition, moved to the keyboard. I began to navigate the drive again, but this time my search was not for strategic plans or economic models. I was looking for something else, a personnel file, a name, for Anna. I told myself it was foolish, a grief-stricken impulse. But I had to know. I had to see if her file contained anything more than the sanitized lies they had fed me. Finding it was surprisingly easy. Her file was not buried. It was listed under active personnel. Active. The word hung on the screen, mocking me. My breath caught in my throat. It had to be a mistake, a clerical error, a ghost in the machine of a different kind. My fingers trembled as I clicked on the file. Her service record loaded. Commendations, promotions, and a current assignment. Head of Internal Analysis, Elysium Initiative. A high-level position. A position of trust and importance within the very project designed to enslave the world. It was impossible. It couldn't be real. And then I saw it. At the top of the file was her profile picture. It wasn't an old photo from before her death. It was recent. Her hair was different, shorter. There were lines of age and authority around her eyes that I didn't recognize. But it was her. It was Anna. She was wearing the crisp, dark uniform of an Aether director. She was looking directly at the camera, her expression not one of a victim or a ghost, but of a confident, powerful woman who was exactly where she was supposed to be. The world didn't just crack then, it shattered into a million pieces. The abyss I had been staring into suddenly had a face, and it was the face of the woman I loved. Section 8. The Voice of Orion. I sat before the console, my heart a cold, steady beat. It was time to make the call. The safe house had a secure, encrypted communication line, but I knew Aether could likely trace it, given enough time. That was part of the plan. I needed them to know my general location, to make them feel like they were closing in. I initiated the call, a single coded burst of data sent to a satellite that I knew Orion monitored. It was the digital equivalent of knocking on the door of the devil's office. I waited, the silence in the container stretching for an eternity. Then, a voice crackled in my ear, not through the computer speakers, but from the subdermal comm implant I still carried, the one they had put in me years ago. "Spectre, you've been a difficult man to find." The voice was just as I remembered it, calm, deep, and utterly devoid of emotion. It was the voice of Orion, my handler, the man who had guided me through dozens of kills, the man who had coached me through my grief. The sound of his voice, once a source of comfort and authority, now made my skin crawl. It was the voice of my jailer. I ran into some trouble in Dubai, Orion. The exfil was compromised. I had to improvise. Project Nightingale, Black Swan. These names mean anything to you? There was a long pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in Orion's head.
You did well to contact us, Spectre. You are in a dangerous position.
I'm not standing down until I get some answers. And I need assurances. Do I get a quiet retirement? Or a quiet bullet in the back of the head?
Aether takes care of its own, Spectre. Tell me your location. We will send a friendly team. They will escort you to a secure facility where we can talk this through, face to face.
I'll be waiting. But Orion, if I see anything that looks like a tactical team, I'm gone. And this drive goes public. Do you understand?
I understand, Spectre. Stay put. Help is on the way. You've made the right choice. You're still a good soldier.
The line clicked off. The silence returned, heavier than before. I knew what was coming next. The negotiation was a sham. The friendly team was a lie. They would use the one tool they had to guarantee my compliance. And then it happened. A sudden searing pain shot through the back of my neck. It was an electric fire that dropped me to my knees. My vision pixelated, glitching at the edges like a corrupted video feed. A red warning icon flashed. The subdermal comm implant wasn't just for communication. It was a kill switch. Orion hadn't just hung up the phone, he had given the order to terminate me. The pain was blinding, a relentless, pulsating wave of pure agony. Cardiac arrest. My muscles locked up, my body convulsing on the cold floor of the container. This was their final solution, the implant's kiss. But they had made another miscalculation. They had built my body to withstand extreme punishment. My mind focused on one single thought: survive. My body was a war zone. The kill switch implant was a relentless assault, but my training kicked in, a lifetime of conditioning to compartmentalize. I focused on my breathing, forcing air into my spasming lungs. I had to disable it. There was an emergency failsafe. With a surge of adrenaline, I lurched toward my workstation, slamming my hand against the computer tower, fumbling for the rare earth magnet taped there. It was a crude electromagnetic pulse on a micro scale. Placing it over the implant could short-circuit it or fry my brainstem. I chose probability. I pressed the cold, powerful magnet against the back of my neck. There was a sickening crackle, the smell of ozone, and a blinding flash of white light. The pain stopped. The red warning icon vanished. I collapsed to the floor, panting, a trail of smoke rising from a burn on my neck. I was alive. I had survived their first attempt to silence me, but I had only bought myself minutes. Orion would see the termination failed. He would know I was still alive and that I had disabled their primary control mechanism. The friendly team would become a hunter-killer unit. Their objective? Annihilation. I could hear the faint distant sound of helicopters approaching. The countdown had begun. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed a backpack, shoved the hard drive and a few essentials inside. My sanctuary had become my tomb. I had to get out. Now. The real fight was about to begin. The silence after the storm of agony was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The absence of the kill switch signal was a scream that I knew Orion could hear thousands of miles away. It was a declaration of war, a statement that his asset was no longer on his leash. I was no longer Spectre, his loyal dog. I was Elias Crow, a man he had wronged, a man who had survived his own execution. The faint but growing thrum of helicopter rotors in the distance was his answer. The time for subtlety was over. The friendly recovery team was coming, and their mission was simple: erase the error. Erase me. The container, once my sanctuary, was now a coffin waiting to be sealed. My body screamed in protest as I forced myself to my feet. The burn on my neck was a physical brand, a permanent reminder of their betrayal and my survival. There was no time for weakness, no time for reflection. My training took over. I moved with a desperate, economical grace, my mind cataloging threats and opportunities. The hard drive, the source of all this madness and my only weapon, went into a hardened, waterproof case. I shoved the case deep into a small, rugged backpack. I grabbed the few other essential items I had stored here for such a day: a compact pistol with 2 extra magazines, a multi-tool and encrypted communication device that was completely independent of Aether's network, and a wad of various currencies. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. I was a ghost again, but this time I wasn't haunting their enemies. I was haunting them. I looked around the small, cramped space that had been my fortress. The glowing monitor still displayed Anna's face, her cool, confident gaze a silent mockery of the life I thought I had. With a surge of cold fury, I took the butt of my pistol and smashed the screen, shattering her image into 1,000 glittering shards of broken light. The helicopter sounds were louder now, a heavy rhythmic chopping that vibrated through the steel walls of the container. I had one exit, the main door, which opened onto a yard that would soon be flooded with tactical teams. But I knew this port. I knew its dark corners, its forgotten tunnels. My escape would not be a straight line. It would be a descent into the grimy underworld of the city. I took one last deep breath, the metallic tang of the air filling my lungs. The leash was broken. The hunt was on. Right. I was ready. I found a small, cheap hostel, paying in cash, giving a false name. In the tiny, sterile room, I looked at my reflection in the cracked mirror. The face looking back was a stranger's, haggard, haunted, but with a fire in the eyes that had not been there before. It was the fire of a man who had been pushed past his breaking point and had found something on the other side. A purpose. The question that had echoed in my mind in the Dubai rain, what the hell have I been fighting for, finally had an answer. I had been fighting for a lie. Now, I would fight for the truth. My fight would be lonely and dangerous. I was one man against a global conspiracy that held all the power. The odds were impossible. The chances of success were infinitesimal. But the architects of chaos had made one fatal error. They had believed their own propaganda. They believed they could control everything, that they could reduce human beings to predictable algorithms. They had failed to account for the unpredictable, illogical, and unbreakable power of the human will when it has nothing left to lose. They had taken everything from me, and in doing so, they had given me a terrible and potent gift: the freedom to do whatever it takes. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, the hard drive in my lap. It was a Pandora's box, and I had opened it. All the evils of the world had flown out, but at the bottom, there was still one thing left. It wasn't hope. It was a choice. The choice to fight back, to stand up, to refuse to be a slave in the comfortable prison they were building for all of us. This was my choice. But as I sat there, the weight of the coming war settling upon me, I couldn't help but wonder about the millions, the billions, who were still asleep, still dreaming their comfortable dreams within the lie. If they knew what I knew, If they saw what I saw, what would they do?